100-year-old woman gives birth to a two-headed dragon. How is this even possible? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The small, secluded village of Eldermist was nestled deep in a valley shrouded by misty mountains and thick forests. The townsfolk lived simple lives, content with their daily routines of farming, weaving, and storytelling around the fire. But among them was a woman who seemed to hold a mysterious glow, an air of quiet wisdom that set her apart. Her name was Lenora, and she was 100 years old. Lenora had lived her entire life in Eldermist, her small, wooden cottage perched on the edge of the forest. She had no children, no living relatives, and yet she was never alone. Her home was often visited by townsfolk seeking remedies for ailments, advice for troubled hearts, or simply the comfort of her kind smile. Many said she had a special connection with the land, the animals, and perhaps even the mystical forces that the village whispered about in hushed tones. Despite her age, Lenora moved with surprising grace. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her voice, though soft, carried the weight of centuries of wisdom. People often wondered how she seemed so full of life, but Lenora would only smile and say, "The earth and I share a bond. It keeps me going." One stormy evening, as rain battered the rooftops and wind howled through the trees, Lenora sat by her hearth, sipping tea made from herbs she had gathered earlier that day. A sudden noise outside startled her, a sharp, keening cry that seemed neither human nor animal. Setting her cup down, she grabbed her lantern and stepped out into the storm. The forest was alive with the sound of rain, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional crack of thunder. Lenora followed the strange cry, her heart pounding with both fear and curiosity. Deeper into the woods she went, until she came upon a clearing illuminated by a flash of lightning. There, in the center of the clearing, lay something extraordinary. A shimmering egg, the size of a watermelon, rested in a bed of moss, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The keening cries seemed to emanate from within it, resonating through the air like a song. Lenora's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen anything like it. Carefully, she knelt beside the egg, her hand hovering over its surface. It was warm to the touch, pulsating with life. She felt an unexplainable pull toward it, as though it were calling to her. Without hesitation, she wrapped her shawl around it and carried it back to her cottage. The egg became the center of Lenora's world in the days that followed. She placed it by the hearth, keeping it warm and safe. She spoke to it as though it could hear her, telling it stories of the village, the forest, and her life. The townsfolk, curious about Lenora's new preoccupation, began to visit her cottage more frequently, peering at the mysterious egg with wide eyes. "What do you think it is, Lenora?" asked young Clara, a girl who often helped Lenora gather herbs. Lenora smiled, her eyes twinkling. "I believe it's a gift," she said. "From the earth, or perhaps something greater." Some villagers whispered that Lenora had finally gone mad, while others speculated that the egg was a sign of a prophecy long forgotten. But Lenora paid no mind to their chatter. Deep in her heart, she knew the egg was special, and she felt a growing connection to it, as though it were a part of her. Weeks turned into months, and the egg began to change. Its glow grew brighter, and the faint keening sound became more frequent. Lenora noticed tiny cracks forming on its surface, and she knew the time was near. She prepared her home, ensuring that everything was ready for whatever would emerge. On the eve of her 100th birthday, as the village celebrated with a feast in her honor, Lenora sat alone in her cottage, watching the egg with bated breath. The cracks widened, and the keening cry grew louder, filling the room with an almost musical resonance. And then, with a final, sharp crack, the egg burst open. Lenora gasped as two tiny heads emerged from the shell, their scales glistening like polished bronze. Two pairs of eyes blinked up at her, one pair a deep, fiery orange, the other a cool, icy blue. The creature's twin necks stretched out, and its small wings unfurled, delicate and translucent. It was a dragon, a two-headed dragon. Lenora's heart swelled with awe and wonder. She reached out a trembling hand, and the dragonlings nuzzled against her palm, their warmth seeping into her skin. "Welcome to the world, little ones," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now." The arrival of the Dragonlings marked the beginning of a new chapter in Lenora's life. She named them Sol and Luna, after the sun and moon, for their fiery and icy temperaments. Sol was bold and curious, always exploring the cottage and testing his tiny wings. Luna, on the other hand, was calm and observant, often curling up by Lenora's side and watching the world with quiet intensity. Lenora cared for them as though they were her own children, feeding them a diet of milk and finely chopped meat, and ensuring they stayed warm by the hearth. As they grew, their bond with Lenora deepened. They followed her everywhere, their twin heads peeking out from behind her shawl as she tended to her garden or visited the village. The townsfolk, once skeptical, were now fascinated by the dragons. Children begged their parents to take them to Lenora's cottage, hoping for a glimpse of Sol and Luna. Even the adults couldn't help but marvel at the creatures, their presence a reminder of the magic and mystery that still lingered in the world. But not everyone in Eldermist welcomed the dragons with open arms. Some villagers saw them as a threat, a harbinger of chaos. "Dragons are dangerous," muttered Gregory, the town blacksmith, during a gathering at the tavern. "They bring fire and destruction. We can't let them stay here." Others nodded in agreement, their fear outweighing their curiosity. "What if they attract predators or enemies?" asked another villager. "We have to think about the safety of the village." Word of their concerns reached Lenora, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. "Sol and Luna are no threat to anyone," she said firmly. "They are gentle and kind, just like any creature raised with love." Still, the tension in the village grew, and Lenora knew she had to find a way to ease their fears. She began inviting the townsfolk to her cottage, allowing them to interact with the dragons and see for themselves that they were not the monsters of legend. The turning point came one fateful day when a pack of wolves descended upon the village. The wolves, driven by hunger, began attacking livestock and terrorizing the villagers. Panic spread like wildfire, and the townsfolk scrambled to protect their homes and families. As the chaos unfolded, Sol and Luna sensed the danger and sprang into action. Despite their young age, the dragons flew to the edge of the village, their twin heads emitting a combination of fiery heat and chilling frost that drove the wolves away. The villagers watched in awe as the dragons, guided by Lenora's calm presence, defended the village without causing harm to anyone. For the first time, they saw the dragons not as threats, but as protectors. In the aftermath of the attack, the villagers' attitude towards Sol and Luna began to change. Gregory, once the dragon's harshest critic, approached Lenora with a sheepish expression. "I misjudged them," he admitted. "They saved us. We owe them our thanks." Lenora smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "They only did what they were born to do," she said. "Protect and nurture, just as I have done for them." With Sol and Luna now seen as protectors, the villagers of Eldermist began to embrace the presence of the dragons. Children would run to Lenora's cottage after their daily chores, eager to watch the twin dragons play or marvel at their growing size. Sol and Luna were equally fascinated by the children, often engaging in gentle games of hide and seek or showing off their ability to breathe tiny puffs of flame and frost. But while the dragons were becoming beloved members of the community, Lenora couldn't ignore the strange changes she felt within herself. Her movements, once deliberate but slow, seemed to regain a youthful energy. Her eyesight, dulled with age, had become sharper. Even her joints, which had long ached during cold weather, no longer troubled her. The villagers noticed the changes too. "Lenora, you look 10 years younger," exclaimed Clara one morning as they picked herbs together. "What's your secret?" Lenora laughed softly, her eyes twinkling. "Perhaps it's the company I keep," she said, glancing at Sol and Luna, who were napping in the sun nearby. But deep down, Lenora wondered if there was more to it. The bond she shared with the dragons felt almost symbiotic, as though their vitality was somehow flowing into her. She decided not to dwell on it too much. After all, life had given her an unexpected gift, and she intended to cherish every moment of it. As the months passed, Sol and Luna grew rapidly, their once small and delicate wings now strong enough to carry them into the skies. They often flew over the village, their twin heads craning to take in the sights below. The villagers would stop what they were doing to wave at them, their earlier fears replaced by admiration and affection. One day, as Lenora stood in her garden, Sol and Luna landed gracefully beside her, their scales shimmering in the sunlight. Sol nudged her with his fiery orange head, while Luna rested her icy blue one against her shoulder. "You two are getting too big for the cottage," Lenora said with a laugh, scratching behind their horns. "Perhaps it's time we found you a place of your own." The dragons chirped in agreement, their voices a harmonious blend of warmth and coolness. Lenora began exploring the forest with them, searching for a suitable location where they could build a nest. After days of searching, they found a secluded glen surrounded by towering trees and a crystal-clear stream. It was perfect. With the help of the villagers, Lenora and the dragons began constructing a large, sturdy nest made of branches, moss, and stones. The villagers worked tirelessly, eager to repay the dragons for saving them from the wolves. Gregory, the blacksmith, even forged a beautiful metal sculpture of Sol and Luna to place at the entrance of the glen as a token of gratitude. When the nest was complete, Sol and Luna moved in, though they still visited Lenora's cottage daily. The glen became a new gathering place for the villagers, who would often picnic there or bring gifts of food and trinkets for the dragons. It seemed that peace and harmony had finally settled over Eldermist. But peace, as Lenora knew, was often fleeting. One crisp autumn morning, a group of strangers arrived in the village. They were traders from a distant kingdom, their wagons laden with exotic goods and treasures. Among them was a man named Alaric, a merchant with sharp eyes and an air of arrogance. When Alaric heard rumors of dragons living in the village, his interest was immediately piqued. "Dragons, you say?" he asked Gregory, who was helping him repair a wagon wheel. "Such creatures are rare indeed. Their scales, claws, and even their blood are said to be worth a fortune." Gregory stiffened, sensing the danger in Alaric's tone. "These dragons aren't for sale," he said firmly. "They're part of our community." Alaric's lips curled into a sly smile. "Everything has a price, my friend," he said. "You'll see." That evening, Alaric and his men crept into the glen, their eyes gleaming with greed. Sol and Luna, sensing their presence, awoke with a low growl, their twin heads rising like sentinels. The men froze, momentarily unnerved by the dragon's size and power. Alaric stepped forward, holding out a sack of gold coins. "Beautiful creatures," he said smoothly. "I'm willing to pay handsomely for them." Sol bared his fiery teeth, while Luna let out a hiss that chilled the air. It was clear they had no intention of leaving with the intruders. Lenora, who had been tending to her garden, heard the commotion and hurried to the glen. When she arrived, she found Alaric and his men cornered by the dragons, their weapons drawn but unused. "What is the meaning of this?" Lenora demanded, her voice firm and commanding. Alaric turned to her, his smile faltering under her piercing gaze. "I was merely making an offer for the dragons, madam," he said. "Surely you understand their value." "They are not for sale," Lenora said sharply. "And if you have any sense, you'll leave now and never return." Alaric's expression darkened, but he knew better than to provoke the dragons further. With a curt nod, he motioned for his men to leave. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath as they retreated. Though Alaric and his men left the village the next day, Lenora couldn't shake the feeling that they would return. She warned the villagers to be vigilant and began preparing Sol and Luna for the possibility of danger. "You must stay hidden if they come back," she told the dragons. "Your safety is more important than anything." Sol and Luna nuzzled her reassuringly, their bond with her stronger than ever. Lenora knew they would do whatever it took to protect her and the village, but she hoped it wouldn't come to that. Her fears were realized a few weeks later, when Alaric returned with a small army of mercenaries. This time, they were armed with nets, spears, and chains designed to subdue even the fiercest of dragons. The villagers, horrified by the sight of the armed men, rushed to warn Lenora. As the mercenaries approached the glen, Lenora stood at the entrance, her silver hair glinting in the sunlight and her staff held firmly in her hand. Sol and Luna flanked her, their twin heads raised high and their eyes blazing with defiance. "This is your final warning," Lenora said, her voice ringing with authority. Leave now, or face the consequences. Alaric sneered, raising a hand to signal his men. Take them, he shouted. What happened next would be spoken of in Eldermist for generations. Sol and Luna unleashed their combined power, their fiery breath and icy blasts creating a storm of heat and frost that sent the mercenaries scattering. The ground shook as the dragons roared, their might unmatched by the invaders. But it wasn't just the dragons who fought that day. The villagers, inspired by Lenora's courage, joined the battle, using whatever tools they had to defend their home. Even Gregory, who had once feared the dragons, stood shoulder to shoulder with Lenora, wielding a hammer with fierce determination. The mercenaries, overwhelmed by the combined forces of the dragons and the villagers, fled in panic, leaving Alaric behind. He stumbled to his knees, his arrogance shattered. Lenora approached him, her staff glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. You sought to take what was not yours, she said, her voice steady but filled with power. Now you will leave and never return. Alaric, trembling with fear, nodded and scrambled to his feet. He disappeared into the forest, never to be seen again. With the threat vanquished, the villagers celebrated their victory, their bond with Sol and Luna stronger than ever. The glen, once a place of quiet beauty, had become a symbol of unity and resilience. And Lenora, the woman who had brought them together, was more revered than ever. But even as peace returned to Eldermist, Lenora knew that her journey with Sol and Luna was far from over. The dragons were growing stronger, their power more evident with each passing day. And Lenora, feeling the strange energy within her intensify, began to realize that their destiny was intertwined in ways she had yet to understand. The battle with Alaric and his mercenaries marked a turning point for Lenora and the village of Eldermist. While the victory strengthened the bond between the villagers and Sol and Luna, it also served as a reminder of the dangers that came with harboring creatures as rare and powerful as the dragons. Despite their overwhelming triumph, Lenora couldn't shake the feeling that Alaric's intrusion was only the beginning. Word of the dragons had undoubtedly spread beyond the village, and it was only a matter of time before others came seeking to exploit them. She needed to prepare, for herself, for the villagers, and most of all, for Sol and Luna. Over the next few weeks, Lenora began training the dragons to better control their powers. Sol's fiery breath, once unpredictable and sprawling, became more focused and precise. Luna, whose icy blasts could freeze the ground in seconds, learned to temper her strength, creating barriers and pathways rather than destruction. The training sessions became a spectacle for the villagers, who often gathered at the edge of the glen to watch in awe. Children clapped and cheered as Sol ignited a series of targets, while adults marveled at Luna's ability to create intricate patterns of frost on the ground. But the training wasn't just for the dragons. Lenora, too, found herself changing in unexpected ways. The energy she had felt coursing through her since the dragon's arrival was growing stronger, sharpening her senses and enhancing her abilities. She discovered that with a simple touch, she could coax plants to grow faster and healthier. Her voice, though still soft, carried a commanding presence that could calm even the most frightened villager. The villagers began to whisper that Lenora was becoming something more than human, a guardian of Eldermist, chosen by the dragons and the earth itself. Lenora dismissed such talk with a laugh, but deep down, she wondered if there was truth to their words. One morning, as Lenora and the dragons rested in the glen, a stranger arrived in the village. He was a tall, cloaked figure with piercing green eyes and an air of quiet authority. He introduced himself as Irinder, a scholar and traveler who had heard tales of the two-headed dragons of Eldermist. I mean no harm, Irinder said, his voice calm and measured. I seek knowledge, not conquest. I have studied dragons for many years, and when I heard of Sol and Luna, I knew I had to see them for myself. The villagers, wary after their encounter with Alaric, were hesitant to trust him. But Lenora, sensing no malice in his demeanor, agreed to meet with him. Irinder stood at the edge of the glen, his gaze fixed on the dragons as they played by the stream. Magnificent, he murmured. I've read about two-headed dragons in ancient texts, but I never imagined I would see one in my lifetime. Lenora studied him closely. What do you know of them? She asked. And why are they so rare? Irinder turned to her, his expression serious. Two-headed dragons are said to be born of both fire and ice, embodying the balance of opposing forces. They are incredibly powerful, but their rarity stems from the delicate harmony required to sustain them. If that balance is disrupted, it can lead to chaos. Lenora frowned, the weight of his words settling over her. What kind of chaos? The kind that could reshape the very fabric of the world, Irinder said. These dragons are not merely creatures, they are symbols of equilibrium. Protecting them is vital, for their fate is tied to the fate of all living things. Irinder's warning lingered in Lenora's mind long after he departed. Though the scholar had seemed genuine in his intentions, his words had revealed a greater responsibility than Lenora had anticipated. Sol and Luna were not just her charges. They were guardians of balance, and their existence carried profound implications. Determined to ensure their safety, Lenora began researching the history of dragons and their connection to the world. She pored over ancient scrolls and books, some of which she borrowed from Irinder during his occasional visits. Through her studies, she discovered references to a mythical sanctuary known as the Vale of Equinox, a hidden realm where dragons were said to thrive in harmony. The Vale is protected by powerful magic, Irinder explained during one of their conversations. Only those who are deemed worthy can enter. If Sol and Luna are to truly fulfill their purpose, they may need to find their way there. But how will they find it? Lenora asked. And how will I know if it's the right path for them? Irinder placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The dragons will know, he said. Their bond with you is strong, and together, you will discover the way. As Lenora pondered the possibility of the Vale, another challenge emerged. A drought struck Elder Mist, withering crops and drying up streams. The villagers, who had always relied on the land's abundance, faced the prospect of a harsh and hungry winter. Desperate to help, Lenora turned to Sol and Luna. Perhaps your powers can restore the land, she suggested. Sol, your fire can warm the soil and bring life to the seeds. Luna, your frost can preserve what remains. The dragons, ever attuned to Lenora's emotions, responded with determination. Together, they worked to heal the land, Sol's flames igniting new growth while Luna's frost shielded the crops from the scorching sun. Their efforts brought hope to the villagers, who rallied around them with renewed vigor. The drought eventually passed, and Elder Mist celebrated with a feast of gratitude. As the villagers danced and sang under the stars, Lenora watched Sol and Luna playfully chase each other through the sky. She felt a deep sense of pride, not just for what they had accomplished, but for the love and unity they had inspired. But Lenora knew that their journey was far from over. The Vale of Equinox called to her, a distant promise of safety and purpose for Sol and Luna. With Irinder's guidance, she began preparing for the journey, gathering supplies and learning the spells that would protect them along the way. The villagers, though reluctant to see Lenora and the dragons leave, understood the importance of their mission. You've given us so much, Clara said, her eyes brimming with tears. We'll never forget what you've done for us. Lenora hugged her tightly. This isn't goodbye, she said. It's simply the beginning of a new chapter, for all of us. On the morning of their departure, the entire village gathered to bid them farewell. Gregory, the blacksmith, presented Lenora with a finely crafted staff, its handle inlaid with gold and adorned with carvings of Sol and Luna. For protection and guidance, he said gruffly, his voice thick with emotion. Lenora thanked him, her heart heavy yet hopeful. With Sol and Luna by her side, she set off toward the horizon, the villagers' cheers echoing behind her. As they ventured into the unknown, Lenora marveled at the bond she shared with the dragons. They seemed to understand her thoughts and emotions without words, their twin heads often turning to her in unison as if seeking reassurance. Together, they faced the challenges of the journey, treacherous terrain, unpredictable weather, and the occasional encounter with curious creatures. Irinder, who had decided to accompany them partway, proved to be an invaluable ally. His knowledge of the land and its secrets guided them through forests, mountains, and valleys. Along the way, he shared stories of other legendary dragons and the humans who had protected them. Each story has a common thread, Irinder said one evening as they rested by a campfire. The bond between dragons and their caretakers is what makes them strong. It's what allows them to fulfill their purpose? Lenora nodded, her gaze fixed on Sol and Luna as they curled up beside her, their warmth and frost blending in perfect harmony. Then I will ensure that bond remains unbreakable, she said quietly. The journey toward the Vale of Equinox grew more treacherous with each passing day. Lenora, Sol, and Luna ventured farther from the familiar comfort of Elder Mist, crossing landscapes that seemed as though they belonged to another world. The skies above were vast and shifting, and the terrain below was an ever-changing tapestry of dense forests, sprawling deserts, and jagged mountain ranges. Irinder remained a steadfast companion, his knowledge of ancient lore guiding them through perils they might otherwise have succumbed to. Yet even he admitted that the journey was unlike anything he had experienced. The path to the Vale tests not just your strength, he told Lenora one evening as they camped beneath the stars. It tests your heart, your bond, and your resolve. As they ascended the crystal peaks, a chain of glittering mountains said to be enchanted, the air grew colder, and the winds howled with a haunting intensity. Sol and Luna took turns flying ahead to scout the path, their combined powers of fire and frost helping to melt treacherous ice or solidify unstable ground. Lenora, though invigorated by the energy she felt from the dragons, began to feel the weight of her years more acutely. The thin air of the mountains strained her lungs, and the biting cold seeped into her bones despite her thick cloak. But every time she faltered, Sol and Luna were there to steady her, their warmth and presence a constant source of strength. It was during one of these challenging days that they encountered their first true obstacle. The group reached a narrow pass flanked by sheer cliffs, where the wind screamed through the gaps with a force that threatened to knock them off their feet. As they carefully navigated the pass, an ominous sound rumbled from above, an avalanche. Snow and ice cascaded down the cliffs in a roaring wave, barreling toward them with terrifying speed. Irinder shouted a warning, and Sol and Luna reacted instantly. Sol unleashed a torrent of fire, melting the incoming ice, while Luna created a barrier of frost to redirect the snow away from their path. For a moment, it seemed their combined efforts would save them, but then the ground beneath Lenora's feet gave way. She cried out as she slipped, tumbling toward the edge of the cliff. "Lenora!" Irinder shouted, lunging toward her. But it was Sol and Luna who acted fastest. The dragon's dove, their twin heads snapping around her with astonishing precision, lifting her back to safety just as the last remnants of the avalanche thundered past. Lenora clung to them, her heart pounding in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved me." The dragons nuzzled her gently, their warmth banishing the chill of fear that had gripped her. Irinder helped her to her feet, his expression a mix of relief and admiration. "They didn't hesitate," he said. "Their bond with you is extraordinary." Lenora nodded, her eyes misty with gratitude. "They're more than dragons," she said. "They're family." After the harrowing ordeal, the group pressed on, their resolve stronger than ever. As they descended the crystal peaks and entered the Whispering Woods, they began to notice strange phenomena. The trees seemed to whisper as the wind passed through their branches, and faint, glowing lights flitted between the trunks like will-o'-the-wisps. Irinder explained that the forest was alive with ancient magic, a sign that they were drawing closer to the Vale. "But we must tread carefully," he warned. "Not all magic is benevolent." His words proved prophetic. One evening, as they set up camp in a clearing, the glowing lights began to gather, forming a shimmering circle around them. At first, they seemed harmless, even beautiful. But then the air grew heavy, and the lights coalesced into spectral forms, ethereal beings with translucent wings and eyes that glowed like embers. "We are the guardians of the Vale," one of the beings intoned, its voice resonating like a chorus. "Who dares approach our sacred realm?" Lenora stepped forward, her staff in hand, and bowed respectfully. "I am Lenora of Elder Mist," she said. "These are Sol and Luna, guardians of balance. We seek the Vale of Equinox to ensure their safety and fulfill their purpose." The spectral beings studied her intently, their gaze piercing yet unreadable. "The path to the Vale is not granted lightly," they said. "You must prove your worth, your heart, and your connection." "What must we do?" Lenora asked, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. The beings gestured toward the forest. Beyond these woods lies the Vale of Echoes, where shadows of the past dwell. To proceed, you must confront the echoes of your greatest fears and regrets. Only then will the veil reveal itself. The next morning, the group entered the Vale of Echoes, a misty expanse where the air seemed thick with memory and emotion. The landscape was eerily silent, the only sound the crunch of their footsteps on the damp ground. It wasn't long before the echoes began to manifest. Shadows rose from the mist, forming images of people and places from Lenora's past. She saw her younger self tending to her first garden, her late husband smiling at her as they danced in the moonlight, and the faces of friends long gone. But then the echoes darkened. She saw the faces of villagers she couldn't save, the mistakes she had made, and the moments of loneliness that had defined her later years. The shadows whispered, their voices weaving a tapestry of doubt and sorrow. "You are not enough," they said. "You cannot protect them." Lenora's hands tightened around her staff, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, she felt the weight of their words, the truth in their accusations. But then she felt a familiar warmth at her side. Sol and Luna stood beside her, their presence a beacon of strength. "You're wrong," Lenora said, her voice growing firm. "I may have made mistakes, but I've also grown. I've loved, I've learned, and I've fought for what matters. I won't let fear define me." The shadows hesitated, their forms flickering. Then, one by one, they dissolved into the mist, leaving Lenora standing tall and resolute. Irinder and the dragons faced their own echoes, each confronting their fears and doubts. Irinder emerged with a new sense of purpose, his belief in the mission unshaken. Sol and Luna, though unable to speak of what they saw, seemed more attuned to each other and to Lenora, their bond stronger than ever. When the last of the echoes faded, the mist lifted, revealing a shimmering portal at the heart of the Vale. The portal glowed with a kaleidoscope of colors, its surface rippling like water. "The Vale of Equinox," Irinder said, his voice filled with awe. "You've earned your passage." Lenora turned to the dragons, her heart swelling with pride and love. "Are you ready?" she asked. Sol and Luna nuzzled her hands, their twin heads nodding in unison. Together, they stepped through the portal, their fate intertwined with the balance they were destined to protect. The moment they passed through the Vale, the world transformed. They emerged into a realm of breathtaking beauty, a land of endless skies, crystalline lakes, and towering spires of light. Dragons of every color and size soared above, their roars echoing like music. Lenora felt a surge of energy unlike anything she had ever experienced. The land itself seemed to welcome them, its magic flowing through her veins. Sol and Luna let out a harmonious cry, their twin heads raised high as they took flight, joining their kin in the skies. Irinder, standing beside Lenora, marveled at the sight. "This is their home," he said. "And it seems it may be yours as well." Lenora smiled, her eyes filled with wonder. "Perhaps it is," she said softly. "But no matter where I am, I will always carry the love and lessons of Eldermist in my heart." As the dragons soared above, Lenora knew their journey was far from over. But in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the Vale, she felt a profound sense of peace. They had found their place, a sanctuary of balance, where they could grow, protect, and inspire for generations to come. The Vale of Equinox was unlike anything Lenora had imagined. It wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a living, breathing entity, brimming with magic and life. The air itself seemed alive, humming with a resonance that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. Towering trees with shimmering leaves cast iridescent shadows, and rivers of liquid light meandered through the land, their soft glow illuminating everything they touched. Dragons of every kind soared above, their forms majestic and otherworldly. Some were as large as mountains, their scales gleaming like gemstones. Others were small and swift, darting through the air like streaks of fire and ice. Lenora watched in awe as Sol and Luna joined them, their twin heads craning to take in the sights. "This place," Lenora whispered, her voice barely audible over the symphony of sounds that surrounded them. "It feels alive." Irinder, standing beside her, nodded. "The Vale is a nexus of balance," he explained. It exists between worlds, sustained by the harmony of the dragons who call it home. Sol and Luna belong here. Lenora's heart swelled with pride and sadness. She had known from the beginning that their journey would lead to this moment, but the thought of parting with Sol and Luna was almost too much to bear. The dragons, however, seemed to sense her hesitation. Sol landed beside her, his fiery orange eyes filled with reassurance, while Luna rested her icy blue head against her shoulder. Their warmth and coolness enveloped her, a reminder of the bond they shared. "I'm not losing you, am I?" Lenora asked, her voice trembling. Luna nuzzled her cheek, while Sol let out a soft, rumbling chirp. Irinder placed a hand on Lenora's shoulder. "They're not leaving you," he said gently. "They're becoming what they were meant to be. And you'll always be a part of that." As they explored the Vale, Lenora and Irinder were greeted by other dragons and their caretakers, humans, elves, and other beings who had dedicated their lives to maintaining the balance of the realm. Each caretaker carried a unique aura, their connection to their dragon evident in their movements and expressions. One such caretaker, a regal woman named Caliph, approached them with a welcoming smile. Her dragon, a massive emerald green creature with golden eyes, stood by her side, its presence both commanding and serene. "Welcome to the Vale," Caliph said, her voice melodic. "You must be Lenora and Irinder. We've heard much about your journey." Lenora inclined her head. "Thank you for welcoming us. This place is beyond anything I've ever known." Caliph's gaze softened. Few are chosen to enter the Vale, and fewer still to guide a two-headed dragon. Sol and Luna are extraordinary, as are you. Their presence here strengthens the balance, but their bond with you is what makes them truly unique. Over the days that followed, Lenora and Irinder learned more about the Vale and its purpose. The sanctuary was not merely a refuge, it was a beacon of equilibrium, a place where the forces of fire and ice, light and shadow, creation and destruction coexisted in perfect harmony. The caretakers, known as the Keepers of Equinox, shared their wisdom with Lenora, teaching her how to deepen her connection with Sol and Luna. She discovered that her own energy was intricately linked to the Vale, her bond with the dragons amplifying her abilities in ways she hadn't thought possible. She could now communicate with Sol and Luna on a level that transcended words, sensing their emotions and intentions as clearly as her own. Together, they trained alongside the other dragons and their caretakers, honing their powers and learning to harness the magic of the Vale. One evening, as the golden light of the Vale bathed the landscape, Caliph invited Lenora to join her atop a cliff overlooking the sanctuary. The two women stood in silence for a moment, their eyes fixed on the horizon where dragons danced against the setting sun. "Do you feel it?" Caliph asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lenora nodded. "The balance. It's everywhere." Caliph turned to her, her expression thoughtful. "You've done more than guide Sol and Luna here. You've strengthened the Vale itself. Your bond with them is a rare gift, one that few can comprehend." Lenora smiled faintly. "They've given me more than I could ever give them. They've reminded me what it means to love, to fight for something greater than myself." Caliph placed a hand on Lenora's arm. "And that is why you are here. The Vale chose you just as it chose Sol and Luna. Together, you are its guardians." As Lenora embraced her role as a guardian of the Vale, she began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her once silver hair now carried streaks of fiery red and icy blue, a reflection of her connection to Sol and Luna. Her staff, once a simple wooden tool, now glowed with an inner light, its carvings shifting to depict scenes of balance and harmony. The villagers of Eldermist, though far away, were never far from her thoughts. She often found herself wondering how they were faring, whether they missed her as much as she missed them. Irinder, ever perceptive, reassured her that the villagers were thriving, their bond with the land stronger than ever. "They speak of you with reverence," he said one evening as they sat by a fire. "Your legacy lives on in Eldermist, just as it will here." Lenora nodded, her heart heavy with both pride and longing. "I hope they know how much they mean to me." It wasn't long before Lenora's role as a guardian was put to the test. A disturbance rippled through the Vale, a tremor that sent shockwaves of unease through the sanctuary. The dragons roared in unison, their cries echoing like thunder. Caliph and the other keepers gathered, their expressions grave. The balance is shifting, Caliph said. A force from outside the veil seeks to disrupt it. Irinder's brows furrowed. Is it Alaric? Caliph shook her head. No. This is something older, more insidious. A shadow that has long sought to consume the light. Lenora felt a chill run down her spine. What can we do? Caliph met her gaze. We fight. But the veil's power is tied to its guardians. Sol and Luna are crucial to this battle, as are you. The days that followed were a flurry of preparation. Lenora, Sol, and Luna trained harder than ever, their bond deepening with each challenge they faced. The other keepers and their dragons joined them, their combined strength a testament to the unity of the veil. When the shadow finally emerged, it was a force of pure darkness, a writhing mass of chaos that threatened to engulf everything in its path. The veil trembled under its assault, the rivers of light dimming as the balance wavered. But Lenora and the dragon stood firm. Sol's fiery breath clashed with the shadow's cold tendrils, while Luna's frost froze its chaotic essence in place. Together, they pushed back the darkness, their powers perfectly synchronized. Lenora's staff glowed brightly, its light cutting through the shadow like a beacon. She felt the energy of the veil surge through her, a force greater than anything she had ever known. With a final, resounding cry, Sol and Luna unleashed their full strength, their fire and frost merging into a blinding burst of energy that shattered the shadow into nothingness. As the veil steadied, the light returned, brighter and more vibrant than before. The keepers and their dragons let out a collective sigh of relief, their faces etched with exhaustion and triumph. Caliph approached Lenora, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've done it," she said. "The veil is safe, thanks to you and Sol and Luna." Lenora smiled, her heart swelling with pride and love. "We did it together." In the weeks that followed, the veil flourished, its balance stronger than ever. Sol and Luna became leaders among the dragons, their dual nature a symbol of harmony. Lenora, though content in her new role, often found herself gazing at the horizon, her thoughts drifting back to Eldermist. One evening, as she stood at the edge of the sanctuary, Sol and Luna landed beside her, their twin heads nuzzling her gently. Lenora smiled, her heart full. She had found her place, her purpose, and her family.